Hello everybody, welcome back to another light novel review. Today I am talking about volume number 1 of Ryo Shirakome's light novel series, Arifureta, From Commonplace to World's Strongest. This one from J Novel Club, only available currently in ebook format. Now this one is the story of Hajime, who is an otaku. Stop me if you've heard this setup before. He's an otaku who is kind of like keeps to himself and is very easygoing, but finds himself the center of ridicule in his classroom, mainly because the most popular girl in the class has decided to make him her charity case. And because she pays attention to this guy who, as far as everybody else is concerned, really doesn't deserve her attention, he takes a lot of crap for that. It makes his life pretty damn miserable. One day during lunch, a magic circle appears, sweeping Hajime and the majority of his class to another world. When they arrive there, they are told that they are there at the behest of the god of humanity, and that the god of humanity has summoned them in order for them to be heroes to save the human race from destruction at the hands of the demons. Now, each student is handed a artifact, which essentially is a stats card. You know, again, stop me if you've heard this one. And as they all look at their stats, Hajime comes to the shocking and disappointing realization that his stats are average, and even his job class of synergist is actually held by 10% of the world's population. He's really in no way anything special. But despite that, he works really hard. But then one day during a training mission into a dungeon, calamity ensues and Hajime finds himself falling down into the deepest levels of the dungeon. And then it is up to him then to try and struggle his way back out of the dungeon, back to the world, and hopefully find a way back to Japan. Now, when I was reading this book, there was a couple things that I immediately compared it to. Can't help it. I've read a lot of light novels. First of all, it reminded me a little bit of Sword Art Online in terms of that whole idea of scrawny gamer otaku kid becomes super OP. There's that whole element of that kind of revenge fantasy, not so much revenge fantasy because I wouldn't say it plays out that way really in the book, but that idea of the outsider, the kid who gets bullied, the kid who doesn't have a great school life, finding himself all of a sudden with a lot of power. There's that element to it. And then immediately there's 3 light novels that came to my mind as I was reading the book. The first one was Death March to the Parallel World Rhapsody. This one reminded me story structure of this first volume, because this first volume, a lot of it is Hajime finding himself trapped in this dungeon and having to try and escape, and that's pretty much the first volume of Death March. The second thing that it reminded me a lot of was in terms of the character and in terms of even how he levels himself up. The thing that it reminded me a lot of was the rising of the shield hero, that whole outcast hero, that hero who's looked down upon because he's considered weak, the way that he's cast out from the others of the group. It's very similar, I felt, in that way. And then the third one, it's more of a tone, and I would say it was kind of like it reminded me of Grimgar. Grimgar Fantasy and Ash has that bit more of a dark tone that, you know, characters really get hurt, characters actually die, and it kind of reminded me of that in terms of the feeling of it, the tone of it. I'd say it slightly has a little bit more humor in it, but still, it's a lot darker than, say, like, you know, the Cakewalk of Death March. Even like Hajime isn't even, I would say, like the same sort of smart aleck, smart mouth that you have of Subaru and ReZero. And so immediately these 3 volumes came to mind. Now, I've already told you the title is From Commonplace to World's Strongest. So it's not a spoiler to say that Hajime goes from being an absolute zero to an absolute hero. The thing that I think sets this book apart, and kind of at least made it work for me and made me buy into it, was that it made Hajime work for it. It wasn't like, say, Death March, where the character wakes up and, oh, boom, look, hey, I'm OP. Or even Kirito, where we join him late enough in his journey that he's already really powerful. Like, we follow Hajime through some pretty horrific events that allow him to become stronger just basically by surviving by sometimes literally the skin of his teeth. And so we really are following this character on a journey of growth. So that at least made me buy into this one a little bit better. The other thing is that as he becomes stronger, the challenges he faces become stronger. So it never feels like, I mean, obviously you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, you're the main character, you're going to survive. I mean, you know, that's a given. But you never really know if he's going to get out of it in one piece. And everything is a challenge as we encounter these new things. And even the way that this book ends, the story, like I try to avoid spoilers and I won't tell you any specifics, but I will say that where this story kind of shifts towards the end made me go that, you know what, no matter how OP he seems, I think this character is still in for trials. Like, I think this character is still in for a tough road, because the road that he's been set on does not sound easy by any means. So the book, I think, succeeds in that it makes the character earn his status, and it sets you up with a story of where we go from here that makes you go, well, even if he is kind of OP, chances are he's still not going to get by easily. There's still going to be challenges. The other thing that I liked about this book was that we didn't immediately get a harem. Yay, no harems. And I only say that because they're just so horribly cliche nowadays. But Hajime it's not a harem, but just leave it at that. I don't want to get into too many particulars because, again, spoilers. But it's definitely, there's relationships in this book that are set up as actual real relationships. It isn't one of those, let's leave it all ambiguous and, you know, then he can hook up with 10 different girls all at once. Like, I don't see that happening. I don't see how that's going to happen with the way the story progresses, and even with the character that Hajime is. He's not as clueless as a lot of male characters who find themselves in harems are. I mean, I wouldn't say that he's a really unique character per se. There's certainly, I guess, the odd little quip that comes in that reminds you that he's an otaku, but because his struggle becomes such a life or death thing, and legitimately his life or death thing, the character just sort of becomes hardened. And I guess that's where it reminded me a lot of The Rising of the Shield Hero, because it's the same idea, right? This easygoing guy looking forward to trying to make everything work, and then all of a sudden, he gets handed a raw deal, and that's exactly what happens here. So, is it really unique? The answer is no, it's not really unique. There's not a lot in this book that I would say I can't look at another book and say they took this from here, they took this from here. The magic system isn't really all that unique. The characters aren't really all that incredibly unique. Even the individual components aren't really unique. Like I said, immediately there were 3 novels that I was like, you could pick from this one, and this one, and they were all light novels that came out before Arifureta. So, but that said, where this book leaves off leaves me curious. The mission that it seems like what lays ahead of Hajime, it looks a little bit more interesting than just your usual, let's get strong and defeat the monsters. And like I said, it seems to set it up that there's going to be some really intense challenges for him going forward. And there's other sort of storylines that are going on in the book that, I mean, it's not just about Hajime. Like, the book is told in third person. We do actually follow some of his classmates and what's going on there. And there's some storylines going on there that are completely separate from what's going on with Hajime. So there's quite a lot in play and a lot of different ways that this series could go. And I will say that even though this first volume didn't feel like it was composed of unique elements, when I read that sort of like end bit and I thought, oh, like this is where this is going, I thought, okay, well, this going forward could be a lot different than the other light novels that we have in English that are similar. That the goals of the character, the end game sort of plan for this whole thing, it seems quite different. So I'm a little, I guess you can tell I'm a little bit mixed bag on this one, right? Because the lack of originality kind of has me a little bit bummed. On the other hand, the elements that kind of come into play later on, I'm like, this could lead to something really interesting. And as I said, I also appreciated the fact that we didn't start off with an OP character. We have a character that, you know, blood, sweat, and tears and body parts, like, earns his way to every sort of new milestone that he makes. So I did get invested enough in the book, I will say. Like, I got into it. And I think it was because the stakes were high and because there was legitimate damage, you know, being done to poor Hajime. And so it kind of made me wonder, like, how much of this kid is actually going to walk out of this dungeon, if he walks out of it at all. I mean, I kind of figured he would because, you know, he's the hero. But anyway, like I said, I'm rambling a bit because, you know, I'm just even trying to justify my own enjoyment of the book. Like, as I sit here talking about it, because I'm like, you know, it doesn't have the charm of In Another World with My Smartphone, where even though you felt like you should slag on that book because of all of its not being original, it was just so charming that you were kind of like, oh, I can't hate on you. This one you could probably hate on if you really wanted. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff in this that is just cherry picked from other series. But yeah, I mean, there's enough stuff, particularly at the end, that sets up where this is going that makes me go, okay, well, I'll give it a chance. I'll give it a chance. This is one of those books that I think really it needs a volume 2 review before you can judge the series. I know some of the books that I've read, I haven't bothered moving on to volume 2 because I really didn't foresee that it was going to change my opinion on this series. But this one, I think definitely a volume 2 is in order to get a better idea of just what this series is going to become. Is it going to continue to be like a cookie cutter mishmash of other series, or is it going to forge its own path, because it has certainly laid at least some of the groundwork for that. So those are my thoughts on Volume 1 of Arifureta. Now, my next review is going to be on a volume number 6. Continuing my catch-up on volumes that I have sitting on my shelf. That's going to be of Kagero Days. I'm going to finish volume number 6 because volume 7 is coming, I think, in the next month or two. And that's the end of the series as far as I know. Or at least that's certainly all that's out in Japan. But a few people who have read it have told me that they kind of get the idea volume 7 is the end. So we'll see. But volume number 6 is what I will be reading in my next review. So hey, if you love light novels, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you're new here, you can check out all of my older reviews. I've got a link to those. I really appreciate you joining me in this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Until then, bye-bye for now.